You will probably not choose the day your career ends. Statistics say someone or something will choose it for you years before you planned. And the strange part isn't that it happens. It's that most people who get blindsided actually had a good plan. Sit with that for a second. A good plan. A real spreadsheet. A savings rate. A target date circled on a calendar somewhere. Not a guess. A plan built with actual discipline. So why does the plan still fail? Because almost nobody plans for the version of retirement where they don't get to pick the exit. They plan for the version where they do. I spent the last several weeks going through federal retirement research. The Employee Benefit Research Institute's confidence surveys, the Transamerica Center's studies on retiree behavior, the Social Security Administration's own trustees' reports, plus analysis from Fidelity and Vanguard. I wasn't looking for one villain. I found three, working independently, all converging on the exact same stretch of years for anyone currently in their late 30s through their 50s. Here's the honest version of what Max Your 401k and Retire at 67 leaves out. It assumes your body, your employer, the market, Congress, and the insurance industry all stay cooperative for the next 15 plus years. History does not have a great track record backing that assumption. Think of retirement planning less like solving for X and more like predicting the weather for a flight that leaves in 20 years. You can chart the route. You cannot control the storm. Let me introduce you to someone I'll call Robert. 51 years old, senior operations manager, about $310,000 saved across his retirement accounts. His plan was simple and, frankly, smart. Keep contributing, retire at 66, let the last stretch of compounding do the heavy lifting. 2 years later, none of that mattered. Robert tore his Achilles tendon in a weekend soccer game. Recovery kept him out of the field-heavy part of his job for 5 months. During that window, his division was folded into a larger team under new leadership. When he came back, his old role didn't exist anymore. He accepted a transition position. Same title, 12% less pay. He adjusted. He always adjusted. He pushed his target from 66 to 69 to make up the difference. 14 months later, the transition position was eliminated in a cost-cutting round. Robert was 54. He had roughly a year of expenses in accessible savings. His retirement accounts were untouchable without a penalty for another 6 years. Ask yourself honestly, is your plan built to survive that sequence of events, or only the sequence where nothing goes wrong? The math wasn't the problem. The timeline was. Robert's story sounds unusual until you look at how common it actually is. Research from the Transamerica Center for Retirement Studies has repeatedly found that a majority of retirees leave the workforce earlier than they intended, often for health reasons or job loss, not by choice. EBRI's long-running retirement confidence survey shows the same pattern year after year. Workers expect to retire in their mid-60s. Retirees, on average, actually stopped working several years earlier than that. That gap between the expected exit and the real one isn't a rounding error. It's where retirement plans quietly collapse. And when the exit happens early, it rarely arrives alone. 3 costs tend to hit in the same narrow window. Cost 1 is the health coverage gap. The years between an early exit and Medicare eligibility at 65 are years without employer coverage and without government coverage. Marketplace premiums for someone in their early 60s can run well over $1,000 a month once income pushes past subsidy thresholds, and that's before deductibles, co-pays, or prescriptions. Multiply that by 2 or 3 years, and you're looking at a 5-figure expense most retirement calculators never ask about. Here's the part that stings. This cost hits hardest in the very years your portfolio can least afford to lose money. Cost 2 is Social Security timing. Claim early at 62, and your monthly benefit is permanently reduced, potentially by around 30% compared to waiting for full retirement age. Delay past full retirement age up to 70, and the benefit grows by roughly 8% for every year you wait, guaranteed by law. There is no index fund on earth offering a legally guaranteed 8% annual return just for patience. But patience requires income to bridge the gap. And if the exit wasn't your choice, that income might not exist. Cost 3 is the compounding you don't get to keep. This is the quiet one, because nothing dramatic happens. Money simply stops arriving. Picture someone contributing $18,000 a year in their late 50s. Lose 5 years of that, plus 5 years of growth on an already substantial balance. And the shortfall by the traditional retirement age can run into the hundreds of thousands of dollars. Not because anyone made a bad investment. Because the clock ran out early. Health costs, reduced benefits, and lost compounding. None of them are rare on their own. What makes them dangerous is that they tend to show up together. By the way, if this kind of number is new to you, this is exactly the moment to hit like on this video, so more people see the full breakdown. It genuinely helps the channel. You've probably heard the 4% rule. Withdraw 4% of your portfolio in year 1, adjust for inflation after that, and historically you had a strong chance of your money lasting 30 years. Here's what usually gets left out. That rule was built around a 30-year retirement window. Retire early, at 60 or 61 instead of 65, and you might be planning for a 40-year horizon, sometimes longer. Extend the timeline, and researchers generally recommend a lower withdrawal rate to keep the same odds of success, often closer to 3 to 3.5%. On a $600,000 portfolio, that difference between 4% and 3% is roughly $6,000 in annual income every single year for decades. And the rule is even more fragile than that number suggests, because of when a downturn happens, not just whether it happens. A portfolio that drops sharply in the first few years of retirement, while you're still withdrawing from it, can be permanently damaged in a way that an identical drop 10 years later never would be. Researchers call it sequence of returns risk. Retirees who don't adjust their spending after an early downturn are, according to industry research, meaningfully more likely to run out of money before the end of their retirement. It's not the market crash that ruins you, it's what you keep withdrawing after it. Now let's bring in someone else. I'll call her Elena. 49 years old, disciplined saver, roughly $290,000 saved, targeting 65 as her exit age with a reasonable path to comfortable savings by then. Her math works, as long as nothing external interrupts it. So what happens if it does? If Elena were pushed out at 60 instead of 65, she'd likely exit with meaningfully less saved than planned, before even accounting for the years of health premiums she'd now have to cover out of pocket, or the reduced Social Security benefit if she claimed early out of necessity rather than choice. Run all three costs together, and the gap between her planned retirement income and her actual retirement income could easily stretch into hundreds of thousands of dollars over a full retirement. Her plan isn't wrong. It's just missing a second version, the one built for the world where she isn't the one who decides when it ends. This matters more for some generations than others. Workers currently in their late 40s through early 60s came of age as traditional pensions largely disappeared, replaced by 401k-style accounts that put both the saving and the risk-bearing on the individual. Multiple retirement research organizations have flagged this group as carrying one of the largest gaps between what they expect to need in retirement and what they're actually on pace to save. And layered on top of that, the Social Security Administration's own trustees' reports have projected that, without legislative changes, the trust fund reserves could be depleted sometime in the early 2030s, at which point incoming payroll tax revenue would still cover a large majority of scheduled benefits, but not all of it. That's not a guarantee of a cut. It's a warning that the current math doesn't fully close on its own. Congress has patched this system before, more than once. It may again. But someone else will probably fix it, is a hope, not a plan you can build a budget around. Here's the good news, because this video has been heavy enough. I followed up with Elena a few months after we first talked through this. She didn't overhaul everything. Most people don't, and that's fine. She did two specific things. First, she confirmed she was capturing her full employer 401k match. She'd been under-contributing for over a year without realizing it, quietly leaving free money on the table. Second, she opened a separate account she labeled, plainly, Coverage Bridge, a small automatic transfer every month, earmarked specifically for a health insurance gap if her exit date ever moves up. It's not a complete solution, It's not supposed to be. It's evidence to herself that she planned for the version of the story where she isn't in control of the ending. So here's what I'd actually do with this information, starting today. First, stress test your number against an earlier exit, not your ideal one. Take your current balance and ask, if I stopped working 5 years earlier than planned, not by choice, what would my monthly income actually look like using a more conservative withdrawal rate? If you can't answer that in 10 minutes, that's the homework. Second, build a real line item for pre-Medicare health coverage into your plan, even a rough one. It is one of the most predictable expenses that almost never shows up in a standard retirement calculator. Third, treat your Social Security claiming age as a financial decision with a guaranteed rate of return attached to it, not a date you'll just decide on later, in the moment, under pressure. None of these fix the problem by themselves. Together, they're the difference between a plan that only works if everything goes right, and one that still holds up if it doesn't. Plan for the retirement you'll actually get, not just the one you're hoping for. If this was useful, hit like. It's genuinely the biggest thing that helps a channel like Novira Invests keep making videos like this one. And if you want the deeper numbers behind your own situation, drop your rough timeline in the comments. I read everyone.